Hey there, my fellow author. I'm Sarah Elizabeth Sawyer, an old soul kind of writer living my dream as a full-time author and authorpreneur. But I didn't start out living a confident, creative lifestyle. I struggled with the fears and the mental and emotional barriers that so often plague writers at all stages of their author career. But the truth is that with the right knowledge, tools, and training, you can overcome those barriers. I'm here to teach you how I've developed a lifestyle that's allowed me to publish 19 books and counting. Each week, as you tune into the Confident Fiction Author podcast, you'll get clarity on the steps you need to take to advance your writing career. Whether it's developing your ideal writing routine, tackling new skills like dictating your fiction, or overcoming the obstacles life throws your way, this podcast will help you live a more confident, creative lifestyle. Let's get started. Hey there, my fellow confident fiction author, and welcome to this week's episode. I am your host, Sarah Elizabeth Sawyer, and I'm excited about this season. So we're in the month of December, and for me, it truly is the most wonderful time of the year. I just love the Christmas season. I love the whole holiday season, from Thanksgiving through New Year's. I love the colors. I love the food, which is what we're going to be talking about today. Well, not food specifically. Well, we are going to be talking about food. I mean, it's the holidays. So I wanted to tie that in, though, to some lessons that I've picked up along the way over the years that I have learned from cooking, especially cooking big holiday meals for families, and how those lessons apply to authors and my author life, my writing, and my projects, because honestly, big projects can be overwhelming. So like cooking a holiday meal or writing and publishing a novel, these are some really big projects, and they can be overwhelming for us in our life, and that overwhelm can keep us from doing them entirely. And for a lot of years, it was a struggle for me to write and publish my first novel, and in a similar way that it was a struggle for my mom and I to get Thanksgiving dinner on the table hot for everyone. So I'm going to mix this all up into this holiday-themed podcast episode that I hope you enjoy as we talk lessons for authors from cooking. Let's get into it. There's this saying that goes, you can do anything you want, you just can't do everything you want. And I remember hearing that and going, oh, that's true, but why is it true? I don't want that to be true because I have a lot of things I want to do. And I want to do everything. I really get that from my mama, I think. She has a lot of things on her list that she wants to do in this decade of her life. And I have that. I have all of these things that I want to do in this decade and in my lifetime as a whole. And so whenever I would hear that saying, you can do anything you want, you just can't do everything you want, I decided to add a little note to that. So I changed it to, you can do anything you want, you just can't do everything you want all at the same time. And so that was my way of kind of cheating the idea of overwhelm and not being able to do all the projects that I want to do. I just can't do them all at the same time because I will get overwhelmed, I'll get frozen, and I'll end up not doing anything. But recently I was listening to a podcast and I heard the guest say something that turned that saying on its head, and it made it very similar to what I had created, but it just says it in a better way. And that is, you can do everything you want, you just need to do it in the right sequence. Once I grabbed hold of that, I was like, yes, now that's the truth that I wanted. That's what I want to be true in life, that we can do everything we want. We just need to get it in the right sequence. Back in episode 2 of the podcast, which is titled 3 Hacks to Stay on Track as a Fiction Author and Experience More Peace, I introduced one of my hacks that I use for balancing my projects and making sure that I don't get overwhelmed. And that's the stovetop analogy. And it's funny, since I put that on my podcast, I had never heard it before, but I did read about it in a book where a woman used the stovetop analogy as an example for keeping things cooking in life without getting overwhelmed. But it's something that I have used for years in helping me keep mentally focused on what I'm doing and not putting too many pots on the stove so that things are boiling over and getting out of control and things are burning and I'm not getting this meal cooked because I simply have too many things going on. So with that stovetop analogy, I think where it came from for me was cooking our family Thanksgiving dinner. So my mama and I, several years ago, we decided to turn our Thanksgiving into a celebration the Saturday before and really have a lot of extended family come in and us be able to have Thanksgiving dinner together. So we did the majority of the cooking. And since my mom and I have cooked Thanksgiving dinner together for like all of my life, almost, it was a pretty seamless process, except now we were trying to do it for 20 plus people crammed into our little house and our small kitchen. Our kitchen is small enough that my nephew, whenever I was telling him about our house project, he wanted to see the floor plan and he wanted to make sure it had a bigger kitchen in it for our family Thanksgiving dinners. So with that, in order to get multiple dishes out into the dining room for everyone to dip out of and get them to the table hot while coordinating with people coming in with extra drinks and other dishes, my mom and I really had to develop a system and really be on top of what's on the stove, what's filling up the burners, what's in the oven, what's in the refrigerator that needs to be brought out, where are the desserts at, and how are we going to get all of this cooked and hot and served at the same time. And so we had to coordinate when the corn on the cob was going to be on the stove and when she would be making the dressing and the giblet gravy and getting the pies done so that I could stick the rolls in there and heat them up. So we have a lot going on, not just for one person, but for two of us. And it is a really big project. But what we do is we do it one step at a time. And we coordinate and organize so that we don't hit that 10 minutes before we're serving dinner and we need 8 things on the stove and we only have 4 burners. With that analogy in mind, think about your big projects and think about breaking them down into one step at a time so that you only have things cooking on the stove that you can manage at that time and then finish that, get it off the stove, get the next thing on the stove, and maybe you're putting that in the oven to keep it warm. Or if it's something that you were just prepping for, maybe it was research for a future project, kind of like I boil the eggs a couple of days before and then that's off the stove and those go in the refrigerator to make egg salad later. And so you may want to look at doing prep things before it's time to get deep into your project. So that can be research, that can be outlining. And so just thinking in terms of what can you get done before you get deep into needing to get, say, your book off to your editor. That's your deadline. That's your getting the hot meal onto the tables in time for everyone to enjoy. So with doing a project like a novel or an entire series, you can do everything you want. You just need to get it in the right sequence in the same way that we get our food dishes cooked and prepped and on the table hot for everyone to enjoy. It's just going to be a matter of you assessing what that sequence is in order to get everything done. The second lesson that I've taken away from cooking, and especially holiday cooking, is to prepare your recipe. So you need to know what it is that you're even making. And for us as authors, that's often your story idea. And having that story idea in mind, having a vision for what this story is going to be, what are the elements, the components that are going to be a part of it, and just really know what it is that you're making. What is this story that you're telling, that you're wanting it to tell? So knowing what your recipe is, and then knowing why you're excited about this story. And a part of that is getting clarity on the story, on this project that you're wanting to commit to. One, you want to make sure it's a project you really want to bring to life, because you are going to be investing a tremendous amount of effort and ingredients into this. So make sure that you know why you're excited about this story. And I talk about getting clarity on your past, present, and your future in episode 7. So be sure and check that out when you're looking at your goals and visions and your why for this goal. For me, one project that I was very much excited about for many years was my novel on the Choctaw Code Talkers of World War I that I titled Anumpa Warrior, which Anumpa in Choctaw basically means language or words. And so I wanted to bring the story of the Choctaw Code Talkers to life in novel form. I was really excited about it. And I woke up one day in 2016 and it occurred to me that we were around the 100-year anniversary of World War I. I didn't know the exact year that the war ended, so I went and looked that up and realized it would be in 2018. So the 100-year anniversary of the war ending was coming up on me really quick. And I knew I wanted the Choctaw Code Talkers to be a part of that narrative, to be a part of that commemoration of the ending of World War I. So I had a very specific project with a very specific deadline that I needed to get done. And I checked myself and I knew I was excited about this project. I knew I wanted to prioritize it. I knew I wanted it on the front burner of my stove. And so if I got nothing else on the table, that's what I wanted in 2018. So I had my recipe for this project and I was excited to get it done. You may have experienced, say, the healing of reconciliation in your life, and you're just especially excited about exploring and celebrating a theme of reconciliation between two characters in this story world that you're creating. Maybe you have a passion for Scottish history, like I do for Choctaw history. It could be history anywhere around the world, has to do with your ancestry or just a particular country that you love to study, and you're excited to bring to light some unknown people and places and history. Or maybe you were inspired to write a children's book about a dolphin pod after seeing dolphins on a whale watching boat. The main thing is know why you are drawn to a specific story, and that will help you stay true to that story's heart. And so that lesson is preparing and knowing your recipe for your project. Number 3 on these lessons from cooking is prepare your tools. As authors and as cooks, tools do matter. I will say there are no, quote, right tools except the right ones for you. So on cooking, we have some great tools that we use every day. Of course, we have our stovetop. We have a great convection oven that we use to heat up leftovers, and it's just going pretty much every day. Now, I will say on tools, one of the things you don't want to do is you don't want to get too many tools going in your author life, and that can become can become overwhelming in itself. You have so many tools that you're having to learn, and you're having to remember to implement them. And I know this was something for me that I started getting some guilt around. I would have these tools for like creating timelines and elaborate character backgrounds, and I never used them because they weren't the right tools for me. But I felt like I was supposed to use them. Other authors were, and if I wanted to be a real writer, I needed to know how to use all of these tools, right? And that hung me up for a while. So I want to encourage you to find the right tools that work for you in your writing life. Now, I do like to keep my tools fairly minimal in my writing life and in my cooking, but there are some tools that they may only serve one purpose, but that one purpose really moves the needle for you. In cooking, those are things like my cousin got us this hamburger meat chopper thing. I don't even know what it's called, but it's got like 3 or 4 paddles to it. And when she got it for us, I was like, we already have a spatula to chop up the meat. Like, this is just more clutter. Do we really want this in our cooking life? And the first time I used it, I was like, yeah, this is staying. I like multi-purpose tools, but even if a tool only serves one purpose, but it serves that purpose really well, then keep it in your writing life. There's nothing wrong with that. And so with writing, it's important that you have the right tools, whether they're multi-purpose or single purpose, and you just want to find what works for you. For some authors, writing longhand is still the way that they get their stories done, and that may be you, and you may feel like you're behind or you're not doing it right because everyone else types or dictates their stories and it takes longer for you to handwrite those. Yet at the same time, it's what connects you to the heart of writing and writing your stories, and it's the right tool for you. The right tool for me is dictation. So I've dictated the last 11 books of the 19 that I've published, and I'm just so grateful to have that tool in my toolkit as an author. I use it in combination with Scrivener, and I actually have a free mini course on those two tools. If you'd like to get access to that, it's free over at fictioncourses.com/dictation. And I talk about how I use these tools in my writing life. I will say it took a long time for me to master dictation in a way that worked for me. I had to overcome a lot of things. And so I teach dictation now through my dictation boot camp and other trainings to make it more effortless for you to be able to master dictation and way shorten that learning curve on knowing how to use this tool. So be sure and go enroll in the free mini course that will get you on my dictation list, and I'll send out information on my dictation trainings. I also, at that fictioncourses.com/dictation, I have a free dictation guide that you can go download as well. You may write on Google Docs on your phone and switching over to your computer, and it's all synced, and that works out really well. So all of these tools are valid, whether you're handwriting, you're typing, you're dictating, you're doing a combination of those things. The main point is that you are finding the tools that work for you. So as a writer and as a cook, having the right tools and preparing your tools before you start is really important. Another aspect of this to remember is that while tools don't have to be fancy, it is worth investing financially to have good ones. Something to think about is, would upgrading or adding a new tool help you save time or money later? So some of these things that I've talked about, like Scrivener, has a cost associated with it. Maybe you need to invest in training and how to use these tools, like with dictation. And then there are the bigger ticket costs, like buying a new laptop. And this is something, y'all, let me just pause on this for a second, because I started out with a PC. It was pink. I loved it. It was my first laptop ages ago. But within a year or so, things started happening with it. It was slowing down. The battery went bad, and I had to just keep it plugged in all the time. And if it came unplugged, I could lose the work that I was doing because the screen would just go dead. And so I fought with that laptop for a couple of years and just wasted so much time because I didn't want to invest in a new laptop. And honestly, I didn't have the money to invest in a new laptop, but I wish I had started a savings fund to upgrade my setup. And when I finally did, I just never looked back. I did switch to Mac, and I recently, a year or so ago, gave my old Mac to my mom because I thought it had gone out, and it turned out it just needed to be updated. And so I had already purchased a new Mac because I knew I couldn't let having computer problems slow me down in my work. So I invested in a new one and gave her my old one once I did the upgrade and found out it was still working perfectly. She had been on PC for all of her adult life since computers became a part of our lives. And every day she would fight with her computer, even her new PC. And I would leave her in the morning and go do my work and come back. And she was still 2 hours later working on just trying to get connected to the internet. And I was like, okay, enough of this. We've got to get you going. And it has changed her life. Her desk is cleared off. She's been able to take care of so many things that she's had on her list for years. So this isn't a plug for the Apple world or Macs in particular, or maybe it is. I do have a very much a love-hate relationship with Apple, but I will say it has changed both of our lives, especially in terms of work and tools in our, as far as our computers go, which run 90% of the work that we do. So if you are staying in the PC world, just make sure that you're keeping up to date as much as you can with new softwares and upgrades so that you are staying at peak, at optimal speed and ease with your laptop. Because as authors, our laptops or our desktop computers are just the core. Even if we're handwriting, ultimately, we're going to be editing and doing marketing and sending off our work and indie publishing or sending it to agents, and all of those things happen on the computer. So I will say, in terms of preparing your tools, having a good running computer that you can work with relative ease is well worth the investment. So I'll get off my kick on computers. It's just something that I think is really important when we're talking about having the right tools for your author life. I talk more about tools, including my laptop, in a toolkit that I created for you, and you can go download that for free over at fictioncourses.com/toolkit. I have listed in there Scrivener and dictation and my computer that I use, the phone, some books that I recommend. So be sure and go download that toolkit if you haven't already. And again, that's over at fictioncourses.com/toolkit. Let's move into the fourth lesson that I have for you from cooking that you can apply to your author life, and that is to prepare your ingredients. So you have your recipe, you know what you're cooking, and now you need to get your ingredients together, which is going to look very different for every author because it depends on your genre. And that's the first thing you want to know is, what is your genre? And be sure that you're reading in your genre so that you understand it. And with cooking, it's knowing what you're cooking. Is it Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner? And this dinner looks very similar for a lot of people, but my mama years ago, she was like, I don't want to have just Thanksgiving dinner again at Christmas. And so she started splitting off the specialty dishes and making them very distinct for Thanksgiving and Christmas. And so it's important that you know your genre, you know what it is that you're creating so that you can get the right ingredients together for that. So a part of prepping, again, depends on the genre. It may require a lot of research if you're doing historical fiction, which is primarily what I write. If you're a plotter, if you're someone who plots your entire story, you are going to be making a very detailed outline. Discovery writers, you'll be collecting, quote, vibes on a mood board. So do whatever works for you to front load that success. Have all of your ingredients in place so that whenever you sit down to write your story or to tackle that big project, you have everything prepped for that. Another little side lesson or a little bonus lesson here that I want to put in is, as you're doing that prep and you're getting your ingredients out and maybe you're going ahead and you're pre-mixing some things, and before you know it, the kitchen starts getting a little messy and you're having packaging is laying on the counter and you've got splatters on the stovetop. So one of the things that my mama always taught me with cooking is to do the cleanup as you go. So we always, especially with our big Thanksgiving dinner, I'm the one really minding the dishes and making sure that everything that needs to be hand washed, as soon as we're finished with that bowl or that pot, I'm washing it or putting it in the dishwasher, and we're throwing away the trash and just really cleaning up as we go with cooking. And for writing, that comes out in staying organized or paying attention to the whole process, even the messy parts. And while you may not do all of the cleanup, I strongly encourage you not to edit as you go. A lot of authors do, and if that works for you, that's totally fine. But I do encourage you to keep that process going and let it be messy. But you do want to look at doing cleanup when you can. And for me, that often looks like just cleaning up my notes. So I'll make tons of story notes on my phone as I'm preparing for a project or as I'm in the midst of writing it. And what's really helpful is if I go ahead and delete the old notes or plot ideas that ended up not fitting in the story and just clearing those out of my notes so that they're not taking up space and cluttering my brain and my workspace, my creative space while I'm writing. This can also look like keeping your physical space cleaned up. So I remember one time when I was in the midst of a big writing project and I was on a hard deadline, and I looked up several hours later and realized I had 4 coffee mugs on my desk. So I had like one from some soup, from some tea, and I don't know what else. Like, I don't even know how all of these mugs got on my desk, but they did. And I got those cleared off and finished the project. So keeping your physical space tidy and clean can go a long way toward helping you stay organized and avoid that feeling of overwhelm as you're going through a project. For me, this also looks like doing my cleanup with dictation. So I talk a lot about cleanup in my training. So after I finish a session of dictating, I make sure and do my cleanup immediately afterwards. So that's just a bonus aside of keeping in mind that you want to keep things clean and tidy as you're going through your project. Just to reemphasize, that doesn't necessarily mean keeping your story itself tidy. Like, first drafts need to be a mess. No mess, no magic. So you definitely want to leave that mess, but look at other ways that you can keep your mental and your physical space cleaned up and tidy as you're going through that project. All right, our 5th lesson on cooking and the author life is to let your project cool before editing. So whenever I was teaching at a youth writing camp, one of my students, she was so cute. I was talking about the importance of, after you've finished writing something, to just leave it alone and give it some time and space before you dive into editing. And she wrote up, they were writing up inspiring quotes and putting them around our classroom. And one of the things she put up was the importance of letting cookies cool, because if you mess with them too soon, it's going to be a mess and it's just going to fall apart. So I always thought that was a cute example. And so with cooking, we know that when we're doing baked goods or we're pulling Tom the turkey out of the oven, we let him rest for that time and let him just settle so that when we go to pull him out of the pan and onto the serving platter, he doesn't just fall apart. And same thing with cookies and pies. We need to let those things cool before we start messing with them. And with writing, you really want to let your piece of writing sit for a time. Give yourself some distance, and you only want to self-edit after getting that distance. And the amount of time that you need depends on the project, depends on how long you've been in that project and how much of a rest that you need. If it's a short story, maybe a day or 2 is fine. If it's a novel, sometimes I can need to take weeks or even months before I go back in and really dig into the edits with that. I'm always tempted to jump right into the edits. I have that ending adrenaline that I finished it and my brain is already clicking with all the things I want to go back and change. But I know I have to discipline myself, make myself notes about those edits, and leave it alone and let it cool before I dive back into it. And so what do you do with your time in between, right? So you have this, you finished this big project, you're letting it cool. What do you do? I know a lot of authors who have multiple series going, and that's something that I do. So I'll typically switch to the other series for that time and work on a piece there. I just want to be careful and not get too dragged away and never go back or take too long to go back to that other project and any kind of resistance building around editing that project that I was letting cool. So you don't want to get too deep into another project, or you may be someone that you have a high productivity level of writing and you write an entire another book before you go back and edit that one, and you just flip back and forth between series. And that's something that you can do. sometimes it's just taking a break. Sometimes it's refilling the creative well. Usually during a season like that, I will just read a lot of books. I'll just consume a couple of books a week even, and just refill that creative well and take 3 or 4 weeks to recover from the project. So don't feel like you immediately need to jump into something else that's productive. It may simply be getting some deep rest and taking some time off while your project is cooling. All right, so our sixth and final lesson for cooking and authors is to taste test your dishes before you serve them to the general public. For us, it's serving it to our family. So I always taste test my cranberry relish and that we make from my grandmother's recipe. I taste test the egg salad and just want to make sure that all of the flavors are there, everything's balanced, and it's really hitting my taste buds right. So for authors, that's often choosing the right beta readers, because remember, flavors are personal, especially with stories and with writing. And so you want to choose the right beta readers or editor based on your initial recipe. So someone who actually enjoys what it is that you're serving and can give you good quality feedback on your writing. So taste testing for authors is that opportunity to let someone else read your work, give you feedback. You can make any adjustments, add any other ingredients that you need to before you serve it. Or there may be something that you need to scrap and start over. So I'm not talking about scrapping your entire novel per se, but you may need to scrap some big parts and start over. So sometimes I do a baked good that it doesn't turn out too great, and I may munch on it and everything, but I'm basically going to scrap it, take what I learned and redo it and serve a fresh batch. So it's just important though that you get the right person to do that taste test and give you good feedback, so you know if you're needing to start over in a certain aspect of your story or if it's just about ready to serve. All right, my friend, I'm going to wrap up now with saying that if you're listening to this episode, chances are you already have a recipe. You have an idea of something that you want to make. So now that you have a roadmap for conquering your project, I want to offer you my own favorite tools. Like I mentioned, I have the Confident Fiction Author Toolkit that I created to give you some insight on what I use in cooking up my stories so that you can start, and you may find something valuable in there that will help you start prepping to create something amazing. Again, you can download that over at fictioncourses.com/toolkit. And you can also get a free mini course on two of my favorite tools, Dictation and Scrivener, and that's at fictioncourses.com/dictation. I will see you in next week's episode. Take care.